Now, let me introduce our speaker. Or are you going to introduce? Okay. Sue Thayer's here. She's traveling across the country. She's with 40 Days for Life, and she's doing a great work. In 1991, she took a job at her local Iowa Planned Parenthood as an entry-level assistant. After a few months, she was promoted to office manager. Sue had a desire to serve women. And because her facility didn't offer abortion services, which she was personally against, she felt like her work could make a difference. But as the years passed, Sue began to see the truth of Planned Parenthood's motivation: profit, not patient care. Will you please join me in welcoming Sue Thayer?
Well, thank you for having me. I've been to Philadelphia before, but never to speak. And I'm not going all the way across the country. I've been in New Jersey and a couple places in Philadelphia, and have one more, and then I'm headed back home. But when my kids heard I was coming to Philadelphia, they said, "Look for Rocky." So I did just ask back there, is there really a statue here of Rocky?
Yes,
and there is, huh?
It's moving up the steps.
Okay, I should probably make a small detour and go find it. I know I won't make it to the top of the stairs. Like Rocky. So, you heard a little bit about me. I come all the way from northwest Iowa. We still have snow. There's still snow on the ground. Night before last, it snowed 2 more inches. Spring is somewhere nearby, but it's not there yet. So it feels very warm and balmy here, and it's been fun to be outside and see all the flowers and things that are budding. Well, I started at Planned Parenthood many, many years ago. And I remember in my interview, the regional director asked me what I thought of their surgical services. And I said, "What surgical services do you do here?" This was Storm Lake, Iowa. Think the polar opposite of this. There's no buildings this tall. It's all flat. There's 9,000 people in the whole town. I'm like, "What surgery do you do here?" And she said, "Well, we do surgical abortions in 2 or 3 of our centers across Iowa." And I said, "Well, I think abortion is murder. There's a heartbeat, by month 2 or 3. This was before Google. And so you couldn't just type it in your phone and see when the heartbeat starts. But I'd had 2 children by this time, and I knew the miracle of life. And I said, "Well, I think it's murder." And she said, "Well, it's not murder if the fetus isn't viable." And I thought, I think we're going to disagree on that. So I left there thinking I will probably not get that job. But I did. And it was a miracle. I'm pretty sure they didn't have any other applicants because they hired me. So I got the job as a center manager within a short time. I went to our Des Moines center and watched a day of surgical abortions. And that was my first exposure to it. I wasn't really prepared for what I saw that day. If you've seen Unplanned, they take Abby in the POC lab, the products of conception, or sometimes called pieces of children lab, and they had the little glass bowl, and they take the tweezers and kind of piece them back together, and that's very accurate. That's really how that looks, and that was a very early abortion. They're much worse if they're further along. Not that they're all bad, but for me, they had me go in the surgical suite, and they had me back up against the wall. And it was kind of semi-dark, and the doctor came in and kind of went around the bed, didn't introduce herself to the patient, which I thought was kind of weird. Sat down at the foot of the bed, and within a short time, I heard the suction machine start. And that's probably one of the most distinctive things that I remember about it. Of course, seeing the babies in the little bowls are bad, but the noise of the suction machine is really something that is very distinctive about the abortion unit. The contents of the uterus, or the AKA baby, are sucked into this jar, and then we put the jar in a urine pass-through, kind of little door, and then we go around into the dirty utility lab, get the jar, rinse it in a big colander, dump it in a big colander, rinse it, and then put it in a little glass bowl. And then piece it back together. And that very first day I was there, we did probably about 35. Busy day. I remember at one point during the day we were, doing the thing in the little bowl, and we're putting them back together, and I said, isn't that a third arm? A little tiny arm, and it's severed at the shoulder, bent like this, and clearly it was another little hand and arm. And I said, why are there 3 arms there? And the lady training me said, oh, it was twins. Here's another spine, here's another skull. So we pieced 2 of them back together. And I said, wow, do you tell Mom that it was twins? And she said, no, it just upsets them. So I left there that day thinking that family planning was important. Birth control pills, educating women on how to not get pregnant. And that's pretty much what I did for the next almost 18 years. I was a sexuality educator all over Northwest Iowa. It was really my job to make friends with the teens in school. A lot of teachers would gladly have me come because they didn't want to talk about the reproductive system and all the stuff that goes with it, because it's kind of embarrassing to talk about. So they were glad to have somebody come. They didn't care if I was from Planned Parenthood or a pregnancy resource center, as long as somebody would come and talk about birth control, sexually transmitted infections, all the stuff. So I started doing that a lot. I would tell the kids, you may not be having sex yet, but when you do, come to me, come to Planned Parenthood. You can park in the alley. We'll never confirm or deny to your parents that you've been there. Your stuff is safe with us. You don't have to worry about it. So basically it was the beginning of selling abortions to them, knowing that they would feel comfortable coming. So I did that, went to all the schools, and during the time, in the later years that I worked there, I started having more questions about, is this what I should be doing? And is this the right thing to do? And I discovered Christian radio. It sounds kind of crazy, but in Northwest Iowa, you can hit search on your radio and it goes almost all the way around. There's not many radio stations there. And I came across this Christian station one day, and I had several of my kids in the car, and it just touched my heart. And I pulled over and I was like, Lord, I know that what I'm doing is not right. There's more, you have more for me in my life than what I have become. And I didn't know what, but I ended up buying a radio back when we actually had radios instead of smartphones, and took it to Planned Parenthood, and I would listen to Christian radio all day. And when someone would come in for supplies or appointments, I'd just turn it down and wait on them. And then when they'd leave, I'd turn it back up. So I was getting all the great stuff, from the Bible, all the good teaching, and learning a lot. Well, about this same time, they introduced Webcam Abortions. Do y'all know what that is? Anybody know what that is? If you saw Abby's really difficult abortion scene in the movie, where she takes the little first pills at the clinic and then later she takes the next pills at home, that's a medication or a chemical abortion. And I think Abby's was a really good depiction of how those go. Typically a lot of heavy bleeding and hemorrhaging. Oftentimes women end up in the emergency room. So they started doing those at Planned Parenthood, but with a twist. Instead of having a physician or nurse practitioner there, we were handing them out with the doctor on Skype. So she would be at her office in Des Moines, and whenever a woman came in at any of the 17 centers across Iowa, we would do a urine pregnancy test, tell her, it's positive, you're pregnant, but hey, we can take care of the problem for you today, 45 minutes in and out. All you have to do is take these pills. There's no waiting period for a woman in Iowa who's seeking an abortion. So she finds out she's pregnant and starts the abortion process all in one short visit. To top it off, non-medical people like myself and other center managers, along with clinic assistants, were going to be trained to do transvaginal ultrasounds. So ladies, if you've had one of those, you know that that's an invasive procedure. You don't want the person that answers the phone and schedules your appointment doing this medical procedure. Men, think prostate check. You don't want the receptionist doing that. You want somebody that knows what they're doing. But at Planned Parenthood in Iowa, it was going to be a one-day process of going and watching somebody do them, and then I was going to go back to my center and be responsible for doing them and training my staff. So I knew that that was a bad idea. I'm asking my boss, what are the requirements to do a transvaginal ultrasound? And he said, Sue, if you are breathing, you can do it. It's a lot like running a video game, the joystick. You got to move it around so you can find the right picture of the baby. And keep in mind, these are tiny babies. They're not very big, so you can't do an abdominal ultrasound and see them. It has to be vaginal. And I said, are you going to let the doctors in these rural towns in Iowa know that you're doing these, so that when women have the heavy bleeding, the center isn't open the next day, they don't know what to do, they're going to show up in ER, you're going to tell the doctors there that we're doing abortions? And they said, no. We don't want anybody to know. We don't want you to tell anybody. We're going to establish a standard of care of 500 to 1,000 before any announcement is made. So I knew that that was bad, and I pretty much determined in my heart that I wasn't going to do it. So they started bringing equipment to do these, and the staff all wondered how in the world they were going to pay for all the 4D state-of-the-art ultrasound machines, the webcams, the fiber optics, the computer systems that were required. And they have a good friend and a man named Warren Buffett, and he wrote the check to outfit 17 centers in Iowa to do webcam abortions, with a promise to do them any place that they would like to start doing webcam abortions. So I remember well the day the GE delivery guy pulls up. He's in his little truck. They're state-of-the-art off the manufacturing belt ultrasound machines, and he rolls it down the ramp, and he comes inside, and he's all excited, and he's like, hey, I want to show you how this works. Come on, where do you want me to put it? And I said, just set it in the hall. I'll look at it later. Because by this time I knew I was never going to do it. But he insisted. He said, oh, you got to at least see a little bit about it. So we go to the back and we put it in the counseling room, and he plugs it in and starts showing me all the bells and whistles, and it had lots of stuff on the control panel. And he was excited about how efficient it was and how early you could see a baby. But then he gets to the button that says print. And for the first time, he kind of stops and looks at me, and he said, I guess you probably won't print a picture, though, for what you're using this for, will you? And I said, no, Planned Parenthood won't print a picture, certainly not for the mom, maybe to put in the chart. So he was, even the GE ultrasound guy knows that Planned Parenthood is not about choice. They're about selling their product. If they were about choice, they would not fear the truth of what an ultrasound looks like. They wouldn't turn the Doppler down so that a mom can't hear the heartbeat. So, all the centers in Iowa are doing these. Storm Lake is going to be the last one to go. I'm pretty vocal about what a bad idea that is. And I'm talking to the Christian radio station, and finally I end up calling Iowa Right to Life, because I heard an interview on Christian radio with them, and I thought, that's who I need to call. I need to call Iowa Right to Life and tell them that they're doing these and somehow they'll fix it. So I did that. I think they had a hard time believing that even Planned Parenthood would stoop so low as to do something like webcam abortion. But shortly after that, I ended up getting fired. They said they were downsizing. Yeah, I've never been fired before, so it was a little bit scary, but I learned that if you have to be fired, it's a good place to be fired from. Yeah, amen. Thank you. Yeah, so I got out of there, and I knew that I had told Iowa Right to Life, so I thought, I'm done. I'm going to move on and have a normal job, get out of the controversy and all the stuff. And I did that for 2 years. Didn't talk about it, didn't think about it, didn't tell anybody. Well, finally, like a group of 5 or 6 people wanted to know what goes on at Planned Parenthood. And they were wonderful little naive Christian people that had no idea the reality of abortion. And I said, you guys don't want to know, trust me. And they said, no, we really do. And so I shared in detail a little bit about surgical abortion and then a lot about webcam abortion, and they were horrified. I could see on their faces, they were horrified by what I had told them. And they said, where do they do those? Not in Iowa. And I said, Iowa is the premier place. This is where they started doing them. And I said, they do them right here in Storm Lake. And by this time, they'd been doing them for 2 years. All the time, every day that they were open, they were handing out these pills. So they said, well, what can we do? How do we let people know? How do we stop this? And I said, I don't really know. I don't know. I was thinking, and I'm like, there's this thing called 40 Days for Life, and I don't know much about it, but I know Planned Parenthood hates it. So let me look it up. And we'd had it, not at my center, but we'd had it at some of the bigger centers in Iowa. And they called it 40 Days of Torture, 40 Days of Hell. Did not like having people out there on the sidewalk for obvious reasons. But I went home, looked it up online, and it was like the last day to sign up for the fall 2011 campaign. And I think it was $197 or something to sign up. And I kind of had an out-of-body experience where I got my credit card, entered the numbers, and then hit submit. And then I was like, what have I done? I don't have time to do this. And I ran the Planned Parenthood, and now I'm going to be outside, and people are going to think I've lost my mind, you know, and all the stuff. So 40 Days for Life starts sending me leadership materials and stuff to read and go online and do this training. And I'm thinking, I'm a single mom. I've got kids. I don't have time to do this. I'm working 2 or 3 part-time jobs. So I was a little bit testy about it, a little bit crabby. And you know how you go on and put the hours that you're going to pray in front of the abortion facility in the computer. Well, I'm technologically challenged, could not figure it out. When I worked there, we were open 32 hours a week, and we were super busy, big healthy bottom line. We were very successful. And I signed a lease as an agent of Planned Parenthood in 2008 for 15 years. So I signed it, and I thought, that's job security, because this clinic is going to be here through 2023. But then when we're going to start 40 Days for Life, it's only open 15 hours a week. And I'm thinking, why is that? They cut their hours more than half. So I thought that was kind of weird. But in my mind, we were going to do 40 Days for Life Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from noon to 5. And I thought, how hard can that be? We should be able to fill that. And so I called 40 Days for Life to get help putting the hours in the computer. And Lauren answers the phone. And she said, I can help you. She's real nice, and I'm super crabby and probably not very nice at all. And she goes, I can help you with that. What hours do you want? And so I told her, the 15 hours a week. And she said, usually we pray for 24 hours a day in front of an abortion facility. And I said, have you ever been to rural Iowa, Lauren? I mean, we don't have that many people here. We have corn and beans and hogs. And we have more hogs than we have people. No kidding. I said, that's not going to work. And she said, well, what about 12 hours a day? And I'm doing the math in my head thinking 480 hours, we're going to fail miserably, and I'm going to look like an idiot. But she was very persistent, and she finally said to me words that inspire me still today. She goes, Sue, why would you limit God? And I'm like, okay. So 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., we put the hours in there. Nobody was signing up. I'm calling people going, hey, did you know they're doing abortions here in Storm Lake? We're going to have this prayer thing down there. Can you sign up to go down for an hour and pray? And I had people saying, pray for an hour? About what? I can drive by and say, Lord, close this clinic. I don't need to stand out there in the snow for an hour. It's kind of what I was getting. And I thought, oh boy. But we kept marching on, and more people came, and I shared, webcam abortion and surgical abortion and what went on there, and a little more interest. And finally, the night before it was going to start, we had a kickoff rally, and I was still hoping to be kind of incognito and just kind of get them going, and then, let them fly and do their thing, and I wasn't going to really be involved. So I had like a hat and sunglasses on, and I was trying to lay low, even in my small hometown. But we had like 75 people turn out that night, and people were signing up, and I was like, this might work, this might actually work. So the next morning, I'm supposed to go down and pray for a couple hours, and I have a daughter now that's 8, and people say all the time, oh, your granddaughter's so cute. And I was just laugh and say, she's my daughter. I know I'm old to have an 8-year-old, but at this time she was probably 2 or so. And so Zoe and I went down early in the morning, and I pulled into the spot where I'd always parked for all those years that I'd managed the Planned Parenthood. And it was cold that morning, and I was like, Lord, I think we'll just pray from inside the van today. Because you hear our prayers, God, whether we're in the bathroom or the shower or the car or wherever, right? And he said, get out. Get out of your van and get on the sidewalk. And I was really terrified of meeting my former coworkers because I thought they're going to think, well, no, they're going to know that I've lost my mind. And so sure enough, they came. I called one of them Mean Jean because she was so angry and crabby, and she did have a few choice words for me when she showed up. But I was able to stand there and smile and hold my ground, and I said, Jean, Jesus loves you. And I'd hoped to be able to say, and I do too, but at that point in my life, that just wouldn't quite come out yet. But after I told her that Jesus loved her, she really got mad. And if you've stood here any amount of time, I'm sure you've experienced some of that, with the angry people. But so we ended up being there for 40 days, 12 hours a day. In the first week or so, I don't know what church y'all go to or if you even go to a church, but we'd have the Catholics here and the Protestants here, and the evangelicals are way at the other end. And they don't like each other. And I had no idea that there was like this thing, and they're all calling me going, do you know how these people pray? It is not right. I can't pray with them. And so I'd say, let me call you back. So I'd hang up and I'd be like, God, if you want this to work out, you're going to have to heal some hearts, or why don't they like each other? I didn't get it. So I kept bringing more material, different devotional stuff, different Bibles. We had a little cooler, and the cooler got bigger because we kept adding stuff to it, thinking, well, maybe this will make them happy. And it just was not working, and I thought this whole thing is going to fall apart because they're so unkind to each other. And finally, I was like, Lord, what do I do? And I'm a foster parent. I've had many, many children over almost 32 years. My last 3 kids are adopted. But he said, treat them like your children. And I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. So I took everything away, took the cooler away and all the stuff. I got one NIV Bible, and I put it in there, put a bookmark in Psalm 139. I said, turn to the Psalms, read them together, figure this out, get along. And it worked. So by the end of the 40 days, they were all friends. But we would go down. I know, amen, glory to God. We would go down on Sunday afternoons, and all the churches would come, and my focus was letting the world know about webcam abortion because I thought it was so horrible. But somebody else said, Lord, we want this place to close. And that was when I kind of poo-pooed the prayer, and I was like, oh, they're going to be here through 2023. They're not going to close. And somebody else said, we want a pro-life center here that actually helps women. And I said, that's probably not going to happen because who would ever do that? We don't have money for that. And so that was during prayer time in front of the abortion facility. Well, we got done, and somehow 40 Days for Life found out that I used to work at Planned Parenthood. They called me up and they're like, you work there? And I was like, yeah. And they said, in the Planned Parenthood where you led the 40 Days for Life? I said, yeah. Is that a big deal? And they're like, yeah, kind of. Nobody's ever come out of Planned Parenthood and wanted to lead a 40 Days for Life. And I was like, okay. And they wanted me to do a webcast, online. And I was like, I am not much of a speaker. I probably, you're going to be better off if I'm not on there. And they said, no, we'll ask you questions, and it's by phone. So it's real non-threatening. And I thought, okay, so I did it. And people kind of had a morbid curiosity about what kind of person from rural Iowa, worked in the abortion industry for so many years and then had this heart transformation and led the 40 Days for Life. So I was talking to a few people. But then like a month or so later, Planned Parenthood announced that they were closing Storm Lake. Yeah. It was the first of 21 in Iowa that has closed. We had 29 at one time. We had more abortion facilities per capita in Iowa than any other state. And it was the first of 21 that closed there, and it was also the 21st abortion facility that's closed during or after a 40 Days for Life.
Praise God.
Yes, we are now at 99 abortion facilities that have closed during or after a 40 Days for Life campaign. And that's just simply because prayer works. And the love that we show when we're on the sidewalk does work. So once it closed, I kind of started doing a little bit more speaking. I was a huge fan of 40 Days for Life, because how can you argue with something that's peaceful and prayerful and kind, there to help women? And we're not protesters, we're not picketers, we're not angry. But when I was in Planned Parenthood, if we'd have somebody outside praying, we would call our donors or supporters and say, we have 5 angry protesters here today. Would you pledge $20 per picketer? Pledge a picket, we called it. And then we'd open the door and say, we're making money on you. You guys should go home, to try to get them to leave. Because when you're out there praying, women don't like to go in. They don't like to walk in. They don't like to drive in, whatever. So your prayers do make a big difference. So I sang the praises of 40 Days for Life, and as I would speak, I would say, you guys should do a 40 Days for Life. It's fun, it's easy, you meet so many new people. And so finally, Sean Carney at 40 Days for Life calls me up last year, and he goes, Sue, do you want to work for us? And I was like, oh, yeah, that'd be fun. So here I am. This is my first official campaign, and I've been many, many places, and am having a great time. I met many of your colleagues north of here, and made lots of new friends. But they sent me recently to London, and I had an opportunity to sit down with Anne Ferrady. She's the head of the abortion industry in the UK. It's called BPAS. And I was, they asked me if I would do it, and I was like, sure. And it was another moment where I was like, what have I done? I don't want to debate a crazy abortion person, But it's part of God making my box bigger. I used to live in a box about this big, and I wouldn't do anything because I didn't want to make a fool of myself, and I didn't want to have anybody be mad at me. And my box now, I have no box. I have no walls or limits. Yeah, which is only done by God. But I went to London. It was the first time I'd ever been in Europe at all. And they set up this 90-minute debate with Anne Ferrady. And so I prayed a lot about it. But we met for this debate, and the moderator said, Sue, tell us why you're pro-life. And I said, well, I think life begins at conception. The moment the sperm and egg meet, there's life there. And she immediately said, oh, I agree with you. And typically here, if you talk with someone about abortion, they maybe don't think that life begins until the second trimester, or till viability, or till it takes its first breath, or if you're Ralph Northam, when does life begin? I mean, he doesn't think the baby is okay to live even after a full-term birth. But when Anne said that, I was very surprised, and she said, well, I believe life begins at conception, but I'm also very proud of the 70,000 abortions we do a year. And I'm thinking, if you think that's a human being and it's alive, how do you reconcile in your heart 70,000 abortions a year? And she said, well, the autonomy of the mother trumps any rights that the baby has. She said, we dream of having your law in New York and Virginia and what's coming in Illinois, because she said women should be able to decide what to do with their child as long as they want. And she said, until they have self-awareness, there really isn't much value to life. Now, is there? She said. And I was like, so are you saying until they're like 2 or 3, they don't have self-awareness, so it's okay to kill them? And what does that mean for somebody in a nursing home, or somebody that had a bump on the head and is in a temporary coma? Can we kill them? And so we made it through this debate, but we get to the end, and she says, are we off mic? And the moderator said, yes, we are. And I thought, uh-oh, here it comes. She's going to really let me have it now. And she said, well, she kind of throws her hands up, and she says, well, I'm not going to come to Jesus or anything, but I can tell people are praying for me. And I said, Anne, you better look out, because that's just what happened to me. And she kind of was looking at me, and I said, could I hug you? And She's real stiff. She goes, yeah, real stiff. And I kind of gave her a little hug, and I said, I want you to know that my little church in Storm Lake, Iowa got up at 6 o'clock this morning to pray for us. And just that we'd have a good talk and understand each other a little better and not be angry and make some progress in our discussion. And I said, I'll keep praying for you. But several times since then, I've written to her, and I send her a little verse or something, and I always tell her, you know, if God can save me and drag me out of there after all the stuff I did, he can save anybody. We used to say, amen, thank you. We used to say things to women that would come in, how much are you going to pay for your pregnancy test today? And if they'd say, well, I can't pay anything, we would say, you know, if you can't pay $10 for your pregnancy test, how are you going to raise a baby? Have you priced car seats? Do you know what diapers cost today? You know, let us just go ahead and get this paperwork done for you. We'll get you scheduled, you know, and then you know it's done. Because we had a goal for number of abortions referred. Even before the clinic started doing abortions, we were required to refer so many women for an abortion. If we hit our goal, we got a pizza party. Probably of all the things I've said, I've had more pushback on that one thing than anything else, because people are like, that's not true. And it is true. I mean, I have the paperwork where the goals are written out on this grid. And if we didn't hit our goal, if we were 5% under, it was yellow. And if we were 10% under, that line was red. And we better have a way to fix that next time. So it's a way to sell abortion, and it's their biggest money maker. There's lots of stuff that happens in order to get, you know, a woman to make that decision. One of my favorite signs that I've seen in front of an abortion facility is a guy holding a sign. I don't think he ever talks or anything, but it says, I know 20 families that are ready to adopt your baby today. And that's a sign of love. You know, we're not angry, we're not yelling. Another great one is, it just says, look at the ultrasound. And if women would ask to look at the ultrasound and see their baby, most of them would choose life, you know. So it's been quite a ride for me, but my colleagues know much more about the actual work of running a 40 Days for Life, because they've done it many times. You know, Chris Davis and Steve Carlin and Sean Carney, they've all run many 40 Days for Life campaigns. I've only run one, but I like to tease them that I did it right the first time, and we closed it. Because that was not even really my goal, so I can't brag about that at all. But God is good, God is faithful. I hope you all see the movie, because it is extremely accurate. Days in abortion facilities are hard. I've worked many days in different facilities in Iowa, and those are hard days. It doesn't matter whether it's a chemical abortion done with the doctor on site, or it's a webcam abortion, or people can now download an app and see a doctor on their smartphone, and they overnight the pills to them. And there's surgical abortions. I mean, we used to have women tell us their last menstrual period, and this was in the 90s when I started. We'd do an abortion and think it was going to be an 11-weeker, and it was really 14 or 15. But they knew that the price goes up each week, you know, so they wouldn't be honest about that, and that was before we did ultrasounds on everyone. So God isn't done with this yet. I know there's a lot of bad things that we see, and a lot of negativity. We were in Washington, New Jersey a couple nights ago, and we had a gal pull up, and she was really angry and super wound up, and we tried to kind of talk to her, but we couldn't even get a word in. You know, she was just so loud and mad, and I'm sure she was post-abortive and hurt, you know, and angry. I tried to give her my phone number, because I said, just give me a call someday and we'll just visit, because I love to talk to people one-on-one, but she wouldn't hear it. We had a couple other gals that stopped, and they weren't as mad, but one of them said, well, who here has ever adopted a child that was born drug addicted? And I'm just standing there, and I was like, and she just went, because sometimes we're perceived as pro-birth. We want the babies to be born, but then what do we do with them? You know, that's the perception, the wrong perception. But we have people here from pregnancy centers. You know, we heard how close they are by, and pregnancy centers offer real hope for women. I remember being in Planned Parenthood, and women would come in all the time and say, I don't really want to have an abortion, but I don't have any options. Is there any place in Storm Lake that would help me? And I'd sit there and I'd be like, no. And we have the, quote, Christians outside on the sidewalk, but they don't put their money where their mouth is. I mean, they've never come in here and said, do you need money for a woman that could use diapers or something? And so that continued to work on me as well, long after Planned Parenthood had closed. And God finally led us, the little group that prayed in front of Planned Parenthood and watched it close, led us to start a pregnancy resource center in Storm Lake. It's called Cornerstone for Life, and we've had 2 or 3 babies saved there, and we have real help for women, you know, unlike handing them a bag that's going to starve their baby to death and then complete the abortion at home. We had women that would do that in Iowa, and we always called it, you know, it'll just be a heavy period, you know. Contents of uterus, it's not a big deal. You'll see some tissue, but when you're doing those through day 70, if you know anything about fetal development, there's a little tiny baby. You can call it fetus or embryo, you can call it whatever you want, but you can tell it's a little human baby. And they would put those in Ziploc bags and bring them back into Planned Parenthood. So a lot of stuff happened, and when I saw Abby's chemical abortion in that movie, I thought, we have handed out thousands of those in Iowa, you know, thousands. And Planned Parenthood continues to say they've never had a complication, but all their complications go to the emergency room. So I have gone on long enough. I just want to tell you that be blessed. Thanks for being out here. To our Planned Parenthood friends, I have been where you guys are, and I know exactly what you're thinking and where you are. I'd love to visit with you anytime. And I said that very same thing. I had a hardness of heart that comes with doing what I did. We would have clergy that would write us letters saying, bless the workers here and bless this place and the sacred work they did. And we would frame those and put them on the wall as a way to kind of justify what we did. But last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, but in Storm Lake, I've lived there all my life, and I knew all the women, you know, that came to Planned Parenthood. I knew the ones that had abortions, the ones that didn't. I've had women since I left, 10 years ago now, come up to me and say, do you remember me? I almost had an abortion, but I didn't. Here's my child. And I am thankful every single day. And I've had women come up to me and say, yes, amen. I've had many women say, do you remember me? And sometimes they'll be tearful. They'll say, you helped me get an abortion. And I kind of cry along with them and apologize for my role in getting them to do that. But I have never had a woman come up to me and say, you know, I almost had an abortion. I didn't. Here's my child. I wish I would have done it. So that speaks volumes. It's a unique perspective of being in a small town where you know the women and you know what they did and the guilt that comes with it and the hurt and the pain. So anyway, I will be around here if anybody has a question or wants to talk, but fear not, you know, put on a pro-life shirt and head to the airport or head to the mall. It's like a magnet for angry people, and that's the best opportunity if you can, you know, engage them and talk with them and part as friends and help them know that we're not the enemy. You know, we're here to help. And we used to have a man named David Shedlock, and he would yell and scream and be angry, and the blood of Jesus, and you're going to hell and all the stuff, and that wasn't helpful. It's a lot better if you're smiling and you try to make a relationship with the workers.
As you know.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sue.